I think that way. Yes, sir.
Hi. I went to a Philadelphia Society convention in Memphis, and the topic was federalism. And they had a whole bunch of scholars there from AEI, Heritage Cato, a whole bunch of professors from all over the nation. And they kept talking about something called regionalism. And their thing was that the threat wasn't from the UN per se. It was more of a revenue-sharing, like local approach to implementing the UN agenda under the guise of local government.
Great point.
I was wondering if you could maybe address that a little bit.
Yes. In Texas, they're called COGS, Council of Governments. You elect city council members, you elect county commissioners. They go to work in the city council chambers and, in their county commissioners meetings with the county judge overseeing them. But then there's this other meeting that they're going to that people aren't trained to think that they have to go and see what they're doing there. That's where all the environmental stuff is coming up. They're the Council of Government meetings. It is a regional government. We don't have regional governments. We shouldn't have regional governments. Doing away with smart meters, which is one of the things that you've got two ladies out here at a booth tonight, and we are, as Texas Eagle Forum, working on that issue in the Texas legislature, and I visited today with the chairman of the Railroad Commission, and we're developing a strategy on all of this. That is an important facet of this. But if you really wanted to go to the base of that tree and cut it down, it's the Council of Government. Why are we having people who are elected to serve in city council chambers meeting in alternative meetings? I talked to the county judge in Collin County, Keith Self, who told me that oftentimes, most of the time, he's the only no vote. People are going along with these ideas. There was even one silly idea where there was a kind of a cover on a fuel truck. And the city of Houston, which has big problems with this same agenda, turned down this proposal coming down from on high, the environmental wacko agenda, to force those truck drivers to have, and those companies, to have a more secure cover on those fuel trucks. They turned it down in Houston. In the North Texas COG, they approved it. And his was the only vote against it. So, yes, Council of Governments are really where this is coming down, as well as, of course, the rules and regulations are coming with, because of strings attached to federal grants. If a local government, a city or a county, applies for a federal grant, then strings come attached to it from the federal government in order to implement Agenda 21. I will give you an example in Hays County, which is just south of Austin. And we've got some wackos from Austin who are moving down to Hays County, and there are a lot of ranchers down there. And they have a river that goes through Hays County. And so they wanted money from the federal government to clean up some septic tanks that were leaking. Very worthy idea. The Fed said, oh yes, we will fund this proposal. Then they came down to do a site assessment. The site assessment said, oh, you've got cows over here, and those cows are along that river, and their droppings are going into the watershed and going into the water supply. You're going to have to quit grazing cattle along this river. At that point, the cowboys knew how to behave with that little man from Washington, said, thank you very much, you can take your business on back to Washington. And they had to do without the money. I was in another county, and I loved this county commissioner. You just knew he was full of vinegar and energy. I loved him. And he said, well, Cathie, here's my proposal. He said, I need new roads. And the feds I've already talked to, and they said, we've got the money for your new roads. You just fill out this form, send it up to us, and you'll get your new roads. He said, should I do it? And I said, yes, you should. And when they come down to do their assessment, and then want to attach all kinds of strings to your money, you shine a great big light on it, and you send him with God and everybody on back to Washington. And he loved the idea. Kind of sparkling his eye, he had a mission he was going to go on. And so you can skin a cat more than one way. Yes, ma'am.
Cathie, my name is Ann Lieber. Okay. My name is Ann Lieber. I'm coordinator of the Prosper Tea Party up in Prosper, Texas. And I have a statement tonight, and y'all kind of stole my thunder because it does have to do with COG. But before I begin, I have a statement and a question for you. But before I begin, Cathie, I want to thank you so much for taking up this mantle of Agenda 21. Your reputation in Republican and conservative circles has given credibility to this message and taken it from the conspiracy theory to the accepted topic at candidate forums and events like this wonderful one here tonight. Your work has made my job as a grassroots activist easier because your trusted voice has essentially mainstreamed the subject. And for that, I thank you, sincerely thank you.
Anyone who knows me very well, and if you don't, I will tell you, I'll proclaim that it is not me, it is Christ in and through me that I seek to honor and glorify.
Well, you're fearless. Thank you. And so my message is tonight I want to say that I'm very much afraid those of us pushing back against Agenda 21 have been ignoring the elephant in the room. That elephant is regional governance via North Central Texas Council of Government. I am here tonight to tell Tea Party leaders, members, grassroots activists, and concerned citizens that your local COG is openly promoting and implementing Agenda 21 sustainable development at a feverish and breakneck speed, and they are doing so completely unencumbered. Please go to the nctcog.org website and in their search engine, type in sustainable development. You will see how deeply embedded the central planning arm of the UN and federal government is dictating, quote, how you live, work, and play. That's their words, ladies and gentlemen, not mine. They have their hands in lots of cookie jars, from care of the aged to clean air and water, emergency preparedness, school ISDs, transportation. Please look at the topics they cover from A to Z, all in the name of how to balance economy, environment, and social equity. This entity is a Soviet-style stacking of boards and councils of elected and unelected officials with the sole purpose, and this is so important, to separate the voter from those making the decisions. A real-life example of this is on December the 10th, 2012 in Allen, Texas. COG's Regional Transportation Council rolled out their plan for a quote-unquote tolling system to be placed on top of existing and what have historically been freeways in North Texas. This system will be permanent, managed, or tolled lanes, or HOV/managed toll lanes inserted on previous freeways like US 75, good old Central Expressway, and 635, all done without a single vote of the citizenry of North Texas. I contend this COG is nothing more than a baby UN, acting way outside their scope in order to dissolve the sovereignty of citizens, cities, towns, and counties in their membership. If you disagree with COG, guess what? They hold the purse strings to regional transportation. So that is how they have you over a barrel. If you don't go along with COG, you may very well be kissing your transportation dollars goodbye, along with the viability of your city, town, or county. Cathie, all that said, here's my question. How can we as Tea Parties, grassroots, and concerned citizens push back against COG and stop their implementation of Agenda 21 and sustainable development? Thank you.
I think if I had the answer to that, I probably could solve every war around the globe right now. I don't think there is an easy answer to that. But now that we know that Keith Self, the county judge in Collin County, is on our side, he understands it. and he is the no vote, most of the time the only no vote in the COG meetings, then how about going to those COG meetings, finding out who's voting against him, who's voting against the people and for this growing of government, as well as just start asking questions. You know, why are you a city council member not taking care of business where people are used to seeing you in the council chambers? Why are you going to these auxiliary meetings and meeting with other people? It started out very innocently. If there's going to be a road in Collin County that's going to meet up with Denton County, it started out very innocently. Well, then the road in Denton might want to meet the one in Collin. I mean, that makes sense. But it grew much beyond that. And especially when you have these executive orders, and you have this collaborative decision-making process, and you have the Delphi process that is intimidating people into silence, then this is the kind of really disorder that is being created in our community. Well said. Thank you so much. Oh, wait a minute. Randy, I think, over on this side, and then we'll go over to the next section.
Okay, Cathie, again, thank you so much for putting this out tonight. You've done a really good job in giving us a thumbnail sketch of what's going on with Agenda 21. First off, I want to say a little quick thing about the UN. UN was originally designed because of the idea that war is worth a lot to be caused by misunderstandings. This itself is false at its face. There's never been a war in human history that has been caused by a misunderstanding. Everybody understands each other perfectly. Nation A wants what Nation B has, Nation B won't give it to them, so they take it by force and we have a war. I mean, that's been the rule for all time. So the UN is defective at its base. Now, what I wanted to point out was the big place that's going to come down upon us as far as the pressure point in Texas is water. Water is the pressure point in Texas. I was talking with the director of water over at Garland the other day at a holiday party, and he told me, he says, we can put in all the reservoirs we need in Texas. We have sufficient rivers, we have sufficient river valleys, we have sufficient resources, we have sufficient damming capability, so we could put in all the reservoirs we need to meet Texas water needs into the foreseeable future. And the environmentalists have filed enough lawsuits to ensure that we can't do that. It is the environmentalists under the aegis of Agenda 21, under the aegis of the UN and the environmental movement, and of course our not-so-good friends over at the EPA, that are stalling and running out the clock on Texas's ability to do water. Now, the other thing they're going to use is these water boards and these aquifer boards. Anybody ever had an experience with the aquifer board? Okay, my parents have a little pond on their ranch. They have 368 acres down in Gillespie County. And they have a little pond. It's about 200 feet by about 80 feet by 15 feet deep. They were told their pond was too big. It's using too much groundwater. So they were ordered to dynamite the dam to destroy their pond. Well, thankfully, the legislature had stepped in and put in things saying you have water rights to the water under your thing. They literally came in and pressured my parents all through July and August to destroy their dam, knowing full well that they had legal protection as of September 1st that year. That's the way they do it, through pressure and intimidation. Thankfully, I knew some people at the legislature, and I worked with my folks and just told them, just run out the clock. They can't come in and dynamite. But this is the kind of things we're going. So I'd like Cathie to give us any additional insight on how they're using water against us.
And that is a huge issue this legislative session, and it's been developing, however. And we've got to be very careful about eminent domain. People's property rights has got to be, held sacrosanct in Texas. And they're, like for the city of Dallas, was a plan east of us to build another reservoir, like was built in Rockwall. And the property owners didn't want that. But I think oftentimes it's the Greens who go in and rebel-rouse and mislead them. I want to be very careful, though, to always put property on this issue. I've put together a new PowerPoint after I got back from Doha, because I've learned that people don't understand this environmental issue at all. And more people, especially after Hurricane Sandy, started thinking, oh, well, we probably are causing the climate to change. I mean, people are truly buying this. But U.S. Senator James Inhofe has a new book out calling global warming a hoax, or climate change a hoax. And in it, there are two statements that I would love for you to hear and hopefully take away with you. One is, it's not about climate, it's about capital. And secondly, it is, let me get my words straight here. Oh, I'm losing it right now. But anyway, it's not, it is not about climate, it is about, I know what, control carbon, control the world. Now, when you're talking about water, it's more of the same thinking. And the whole environmental agenda is meant to do this. It is green on the outside, but it is Marxist red on the inside. It is the Marxist agenda. I know that you heard that over and over again tonight without hearing those words, because that's exactly what it is. We call it the watermelon effect. But if you control carbon, you control the world. Control water, you're going to control those people. So that is more of the same agenda. Over in Titus County, just about 2.5 hours east of Dallas on I-30, the EPA tried to shut down 2 power plants, and that would have devastated the county, taking away most of their jobs. And if it wasn't for Greg Abbott going to Washington and suing them and coming back to Texas and doing his job here, we would have seen much more devastation in Texas. Barack Hussein Obama said when he was running for office the first time that, yes, you can build a coal plant, but you'll go bankrupt. He's serious about that. And they don't want nuclear either. Nuclear produces no carbon emissions, none. By the way, carbon dioxide is 0.03 something % of the air that is out there. Oxygen is like 20-some %. And I have this in that other presentation. We're not talking about very much of anything. And we're certainly not talking about a pollutant. Carbon dioxide, the more that is emitted, the more, through photosynthesis, is taken in by the trees and plants and emitting oxygen. Got it. So we're not talking about a pollutant here. And yet he is out to control people. And so you control carbon, you control the world. And it's not about climate, it's about capital. I get that.
Just a couple comments. In addition to uranium, they now have thorium reactors. This technology was developed back in the 40s or 50s. It doesn't produce any radiation. It's cheaper, and there's no pollutant factor whatsoever, and they are working on it now over in either Asia or Europe. They're starting to work on that. And on carbon dioxide, not only do the plants turn around and produce oxygen, if we had a higher rate of carbon dioxide in the air, deserts would be blooming.
Yes.
If we could produce enough food to feed all the people they're afraid might be born.
Excellent point. Excellent point. Because our children, through the EPA, are being told that there is so much carbon being emitted now because we're burning fossil fuels that we're causing the climate change. That is a curriculum that the EPA is putting out for our children to brainwash them in the schools. And so this is what we're up against. We've got all these federal bureaucracies, but you know, I talked earlier today with a gentleman who graduated in the sciences, and he heard a lot of this stuff when he was in college, and he said, we all knew it was a bunch of hooey. But now, you've got it in elementary school, you have it in middle school, you have it in high school. By the time they get to college, they're brainwashed. There were two, and I'm an Aggie mom, I'm going to tell you. It was really disappointing to me to hear that A&M is brainwashing like every other university. And I know because I went to Bonn, Germany a few years ago, and there were two Aggies there. And of course, I just took them under my wing like sons and loved on them. Well, anyway, one day they went in and shut down the entire UN computer system for a day. Isn't that lovely? But anyway, the reason they felt so much energy to do such helpful things was because they went over to Bonn, Germany, thinking that this all must be true. And then they met a real teacher, a man who was a meteorologist, who had tremendous science credentials, and he taught them the truth. And they looked around and thought, oh my goodness, we have been lied to. And so this is what the youth have got to come to understand, but we're going to have to do some unraveling of that brainwashing. Sorry. Sorry, there's lady. Bill, you're next.
Well, I have a plethora list, but I wanted to tell the lady in Prosper, which is where our son and daughter-in-law and granddaughter live, that the way they get approval for this is that I've noticed in the city of Richardson, they will create a resolution from the member cities, and it says, and I'll give you an example, it's like the tollway they're creating on 35 between 635 and up to Denton, okay? The city of Richardson created a resolution that says, yes, we were in favor of that, gave that to the North Central Texas COG, to the Regional Transportation Council, and gave away the vote affirmative for 100,000 people in this city who had no idea that it happened. And they do that on the consent agenda, and these council members that are here know me well enough to know that I go pull documents when it comes to things like that. The second thing is, my husband's a commercial land surveyor, and he does projects all over the state. We were talking about Houston. When it comes to a lot of these tollways, they're doing public-private partnerships. You've heard that term before? Right now, he's working on a project that's a 40-mile tow road down in Houston that's being publicly funded, but they are waiting for 100% reimbursement for that after it's built. And they do this under these economic development agreements that you have to go pull and find all of this stuff. But I'm speaking very globally, but I went to the North Central Texas COG a few years ago and realized that they now do CAFRs, like governmental accounting, even though that they're not a governmental entity. And basically they get grant money and they hold 35% of it and dole out the other 65% to the member cities. And I thought, why would any city give up any grant money at the time for that particular purpose? Because we have so many filters, like in the city of Richardson, we have a private corporation that handles some of the economic development things that you're talking about. But my question to you is, in 1990, I have two of them if you'll bear with me. In 1992, when all of this came down, there was also a change in Texas where a few years later, the Certificate of Obligation Act went from being 8 or 10-year non-voter approved debt that could be created to 40-year product with an unlimited amount of things that they could build and do without citizen or voter approval. And is that part of this? That's my first question.
I don't know that, I think the inventive styles of funding that are coming in, I can't say that that is right out of Agenda 21, but definitely they're coming up with inventive ways to fund it. And public-private partnerships are fascism. They came right out of Mussolini's Italy. I mean, you can own your company, but we're going to tell you what you're going to do with it.
Yeah.
And what you're not.
Yeah.
And we're going to rule and regulate you until you're in oblivion. And you just may as well just say, okay, the government owns it. So that's what public-private partnerships are. And I fought those in the Trans-Texas Court. So, yeah. And we've got to stop the government from pilfering the two funds that are supposed to pay for highway protection. And always did a good job until the last few years.
TxDOT.
Yeah. And so TxDOT is really in disarray still. And so I think it's inventive funding ideas are coming from a plethora of sources. But I can't say that I can put my finger on agenda